and a whole other conversation, but no sense of identity, which is particularly important for teenagers because they'll try on identities like different outfits, won't they? They'll go, oh, do I want to be the kid that wags school?
Yes.
Do I want to be the kid that follows all the rules? Do I want to be the kid that does my own thing at lunchtime? Do I want to be the kid surrounded by people? Do I want to be the jock, right? So, and I understand that, that's all part of that, but if that looking for or searching for identity is always shadowed by this self-doubt in your own inner resources, then we are setting up our children for great distress. Quanta folks, and welcome to another episode of Alchemising Education, which is our little sister podcast from Fark the Shoulds. And Fark the Shoulds absolutely underpins how we want to alchemise education. We want to remove should from the whole vernacular of education. I am delighted to join you. I'm Jodie from Quanta Mama, and I'm joined by the beautiful
Curious Quinn.
Curious
Hello,
as always.
As always. And yes, those shoulds are the foundation of everything, aren't they?
Yes, they are. That's right. Well, certainly farking them.
Definitely.
So a couple of housekeeping things. Quinny, off air, wanted to just tell me that she should be mindful of her ums and ahs because our beloved husbands, who were being completely shite wingmen, were busy saying to us, oh, great podcast, except there's so many umming and ahhing. Anyway, I say, fark the shoulds. You can and ah as much as you want, Quinn, and I will too. Well, you guys, you get us, right? Yeah. That's the whole thing. That's it. That's it. This is a raw, unfiltered conversation from two very cool but daggy mums who just love their kids and want to pull apart what is happening in education right now and what's happening for our young people so that we don't end up with this epidemic of mental health, which I think is already here anyway.
Definitely. Yeah. And the passion that comes through when, I'm listening to you talk and it's like, yes, So
That's right. They're listening gasms, aren't they?
That's exactly what they are.
I love a listening gasm.
I do it even when I'm listening to a voicemail message.
I love that too. It's like a massive compliment. And I got to tell our beautiful community too that one of the most delightful times in my life is when I can get you to snort while you're laughing.
Let's see.
Which is a Quinnism anyway. I mean, well, I don't know if the snort will translate, but anyway.
It comes when you least expect it.
Yeah, I know, that's right. And it brings me so much delight. So today, let's come on to the actual topic of conversation today. So, I got to say, I've been a little bit slack with getting these podcasts out there. You won't experience that as a listener because I'll be organised once I'm posting this one, but I've got a backlog. It's like a bunch of semis with podcasts on them backed up at my door at the moment. So I'm conscious about that. So we're just, finding our groove back in with this conversation. But today's conversation is all about running your own race. And just as it's happened before, I literally sent Quinn a text message about half an hour going, hey, this is what we're going to talk about today. Because we do love the fresh stuff. We do really trust that what comes through in these conversations is from the heart and from the universal field, in the sense that the collective, it's the wisdom within the collective that we're just giving voice to. Absolutely. It's not necessarily our wisdom, it's just existing and we happen to have an access point.
Yep.
So running your own race, what's that all about? And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is that there's a couple of things. Firstly, I ran a little baby steps to homeschooling thing recently, and I was joined by one of my beloved besties, and we were talking about how long we'd been homeschooling, and we worked out it was 2 years. And then I finished that event with those beautiful people and said to McGill, oh crap, it's actually 3 years we've been homeschooling. I was like, where did the other year go? And the point of saying we've been homeschooling for 3 years, or having the kids at home is probably a more accurate term. The reason why I'm bringing that up is that recently what's been happening for me is I've been saying to myself, am I doing enough? Are the kids' needs being met? Am I meeting their needs from an education point of view? Because having 4 kids, all with individual interests and individual learning plans, sometimes what happens is, and I'm sure this is exactly what's happening in school, except it's an organised thing, but what happens is you look for ways to kind of create learning opportunities for a couple of them so you can be more efficient with your education. Now, as I start doing that, that's in direct contrast to what I would advocate, and certainly what McGill and I talk about in our Take the Leap course, our parenting course, because it's all about titrating education for the individual and meeting their needs, whether that's in the traditional school system or outside school. And so just noticing that it's probably too strong a term to call it a crisis of confidence, but just a questioning, just a quiet questioning, we'll call that. And it's always tied to the critique of, am I being a good enough parent?
The mother's guilt, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's for both, isn't it?
Totally.
McGill doesn't seem as tapped into it as much as me, bless him. But yes, the mother's guilt, definitely. And it knows no limitations and no bounds. Like, you can apply it to everything. So just when you think you've got yourself coasting, then something will crop up and the little voice will say, oh, do you reckon you're doing a good enough job of this? So the reason why I want to then tease out this idea of running our own race is for a couple of reasons. I want to self-soothe. So
yeah, of course.
We're going to use this podcast to self-soothe me. And it's not about convincing our listeners of what we're doing is enough. It's actually about being able to look my kids in the eye and saying, I'm meeting your needs to the best of my knowledge and my ability and my capacity and my heart.
That's perfect.
I think that'll do. We'll
That's
retire on that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Because that's about what we can do.
Yeah.
And it's about teaching them to do the same for themselves.
I agree. And it always comes back to what I call foundational beliefs or foundational ideologies. And that is, I want my kids to be good people. I care not whether they know the full Australian history or what Pythagoras actually means to them off the top of their head. And the only thing I can remember about Pythagoras is Pythagoras. I can't remember the rest of it. I'm sure I've used that math at some point, but, I know not how to explain it, right?
I can just see it in a symbology perspective, and that's about it.
Good. Okay, so we've both got something out of Pythagoras.
Yep.
So I'm just curious about what comes up for the curious Quinn when we talk about running our own race. Because, I think as we've touched on in previous conversations, you have most certainly run your own race this year. For those listening to us, we're recording this as we close out the school year here in Australia. So we're talking the tail end of the school year. And we very much in our household haven't observed the school year really. We kind of notice when school holidays are on because more kids become available for plays. But other than that, we don't notice that. You have still observed the school year in some fashion. And so what does that bring up for you when you think about running your own race?
Yeah, I just think how important it is to just look at the individual, and I know that we need to all have some level of efficiency because that's just how, sometimes you just need to get stuff done. But running your own race, I just feel there's so much more power in the end result. The confidence of the individual, that the skill set that they develop, the belief in themselves, their sense of well-being, their sense of commitment to their own needs, the not doing the shoulds, and when they learn to find their confidence in doing what's right for them and knowing that is perfect in its entirety is just the greatest gift that we can give them. So it's really hard though when you're in a system, whatever system it might be, or in an environment where you compare yourself and you feel like you have to be doing what everyone else is doing, they're doing that, but I should be doing that. And that starts at such a young age, which we've spoken about before. It starts so early, and it starts with us as parents.
Oh,
you know, when you're starting
no
the mothers groups or whatever else, and then you're sitting there looking at, like, within a week, well, yours is doing, you know, they've started to do that a week before mine. Like, we get to that detail at the very beginning, don't we? That comparison.
I remember that. The pissing contest of parents. Yeah,
basically. Yeah. And so when we take them through these environments where they're just sitting there thinking, well, why are they doing that and I can't do that? And getting our children to just go, it's okay being you. It's okay focusing on that topic. It's okay doing it that way. And giving them the confidence, because as I've sort of discovered through the system is that you lose a lot of confidence as you go through the years, because you kind of confidence in your ability to make your own decisions, do it your own way. So we lose that individuality. We lose that ability to be us and to be true to ourselves and to be confident within our own way of doing things. You know, there's so many different solutions to a puzzle or different ways of getting to the end result.
Yes.
But when we're in an environment where we are constantly sitting beside other people and we're being given a process that we should be following, do it this way to get that result, do it this way to get that result, we do it this way. It's always we're guided about how to learn or what to learn first, what to learn second, and we then almost get paralysed by the end of it, because we think, look, there's no framework or no structure. I don't know what to do outside of that.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. You know, my daughter, who was an amazing cook, and yet she takes for granted her skill set in the kitchen. Like, she just creates things. She doesn't need a recipe. Like, 18 and has never really followed recipes, has been very confident in just substituting ingredients and doing whatever it is that she thinks will work and having a go at it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it's that, you know, running your own race around making your own decisions to get to a result, I think is so valuable, because that's where the creativity comes in and that's where we can create amazing things.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're all following the same thing, then we're all just creating the same thing, and that's really boring, isn't it?
Well, I think it creates an outcome that everyone expects, which is a certain amount of, you know, kids will rank in the 90th percentile, a certain amount will rank in the above 70 percentile, and blah blah blah, right? And I think that it's absolutely set up by the administrators. It's not a program or a system that's set up for the individual, because very rarely have I seen conversations around emotional resilience, say following even exams, assignments. NAPLAN was a classic, like bringing that into schools. And I know there are a lot of parents that have opted out of NAPLAN, which is obviously it's basically a standardised test that they give to all kids, and they do it through primary and high school, don't they?
It's like year 3,
we start at grade
5,
3,
and then again in like year 8,
7 or something. Yeah, 8.
Yeah.
Anyway, we stopped paying attention because the kids don't have to do it. But one of my kids, I was happy for them to not do it, and I was, you know, kind of saying to them, hey, you got the option if you don't want to do that. So I was actually planting that idea. But my daughter, who is brilliant in her own way, but not academic. Academia doesn't come with ease to her. She was like, oh, I really want to do it. I think she wanted to test herself. And so she did it. But when she got her results, they were as we had anticipated, right? They didn't set the room on fire. And she just was so quietly grief-stricken by it. Like almost it surprised her in some way. And what I didn't see was any way for us to, or should I say within the school system, for them to support her and create understanding around that. So all that happened was she chose to get this standardised test done, which helps them because then they actually get what appear to be the dum-dums on paper as well. So that gives them a range, right? So she serves a purpose for the administrators. But there was no follow-up process and no responsibility on the part of the system to hold space for her in a way that felt good. Like they could have integrated some kind of art class that was about drawing your feelings around that, so the kids could move through the emotional roller coaster of that experience and find some kind of inner resource to work that out. And when I say inner resource, that sounds like some kind of ridiculous term, but what it's about is finding the answer within, tapping into your own set of instructions and find the answer within that is that sort of alchemising of what that feeling is like. Because I'm not about having children have a perfect stress-free life. I actually think stress is really important. I think challenges are really important. Just so you know, Quinn's nodding away. She's forcing her internally.
I am. My nods are very big at the moment.
Yeah, so what I'm interested in is it's almost irresponsible, because what we do is we create these stresses in this very coordinated system that goes throughout Australia. And I know there'll be certain individuals out there who are tweaking it and, giving it their own. But as a holistic system, it doesn't deal with that. And so then what I'm doing is I'm picking up on what you were talking about, which is it's 1,000 hertz that create this cumulative effect that by the time we get to high school, you've got these kids that don't know if they're Arthur or Martha. So they've got no sense of identity, and that's in a whole other conversation, but no sense of identity, which is particularly important for teenagers because they'll try on identities like different outfits, won't they? They'll go, do I want to be the kid that wags school?
Yes.
Do I want to be the kid that follows all the rules? Do I want to be the kid that does my own thing at lunchtime? Do I want to be the kid surrounded by people? Do I want to be the jock, right? Yeah. So, and I understand that. That's all part of that. But if that looking for or searching for identity is always shadowed by this self-doubt in your own inner resources, then we are setting up our children for great distress. And the issue I see, and this is partly from, being a paramedic for 18 years, was, excuse me, I saw all the risk-taking behaviour in that sort of 18 to 25 year.
Yep.
They were outside slightly, but that was a real risk-taking behaviour. Now, what you've got is kids that are jumping out of the system, not having a sense of themselves, not understanding that really what they need to do is be good people and love themselves. They jump out of the system, they're coming out essentially emotionally damaged, and we're not finding it amazing because it's the norm, right? So no one is perturbed by it. And then they go into a time of their lives where they are in their heightened risk-taking, decision-making and opportunities. And so I'm just curious, why is the programming so strong for, say, someone like me who's known as a fiery redhead to still be conflicted with, am I doing enough for my kids? When I already know that overarchingly throughout society, this is what plays out. And I'm not saying it happens to everybody. There is always a kaleidoscope in our society. But I'm just so interested about that thought flow that's happened for me. And I suppose what I want to do is come round to what are some of the things that we have done to create some level of self-assurance that running our own race within this, say specifically, has been effective for us.
Yeah, I think I really think for me it was about reflecting on my own education and what I took away from that has helped me in life. Like, what were the things that made a really big difference? So when we stop and say, well, okay, how did education serve us? How did going through school, primary school, secondary, whatever, post that, how does that how did that really help me? And when I started to do that and I started to think about it, I realised that it wasn't the academia And it wasn't the school results, and it wasn't learning. I mean, geography I liked because it was pretty practical for me, and I loved travelling. So that was a topic that I enjoyed. Biology, again, it's about life stuff. So for me, it was about reflecting on what were the life skills that I gained, or who were the people who influenced me most that got me to where I am today. And I realised also that it wasn't just teachers. It wasn't just sitting in a classroom that gave me those life skills or that education. It was well beyond that. It was some of the extracurriculum. It was maybe a family holiday. It was maybe a family friend that took me under their wing and showed me a few things. It was the hobbies that I took up and what I learnt from those hobbies. So I think when I started to reflect on my own education and the value that played in where I am today, and then I started to go, well, okay, do my children need... How important is that education in where they're going to be in 10, 20, 30 years' time?
Yes.
That's possibly one of the really big pivotal moments for me when I took the leap, the course, because it really took me through that thought process. And I realised that the education system was only one part of my overall learning and setting me up for life. There was so much more beyond it. So I think, that's and then that then gives you the confidence to say, well, it's not just what they get done through the academia that's going to give them what they want in life. So that's when I said, well, I didn't go to university. I did go to university, after I'd been working for 4 years. Again, I was encouraged to do that because, the work where I was working would pay for my course. If I passed a subject, I'd get reimbursement. So it's like, oh, you beauty, there's an opportunity here to sort of maybe, increase my education. But ultimately, it still didn't create the opportunities that I think were life-changing for me.
Yeah. I do love the idea of higher education, being tied to real work experience.
Correct. And I think that was really beneficial for me because I was not ready for university when I finished high school because I had no idea what I really wanted to do. I just wanted to start working.
Yeah, right.
I just wanted to start working. And then it wasn't until I started working, I changed a few sort of different jobs and got into a role that I was more aligned to. So it's not till you start working do you start to see the different job environments. And, I just feel like it's that practical life skills that are really hard to get out of a classroom environment.
I love what you said. I want to just quickly take you back to the idea that some of the great learnings that you had were associated with your hobbies because essentially, because obviously you're homeschooling 1, I'm homeschooling 4, what we share in common is that their education model now is activity-based.
Yes.
And, that's one of the legitimate options that's certainly supported by the VRQA, which is the registration board in Victoria. And I'm sure that goes for the whole of Australia, as all the various state registration boards, they see academia and activity-based learning systems to be of equal value. And so when I think about that, it's almost an integration. So we find things that the kids love doing, and then what we do is we meet the curriculum needs through the prism of that hobby, for want of a better term. And what I love is the way, the fluidity of it. The way the kids sort of start somewhere and then they end up somewhere else. And the other thing that has been such a joy is that I would have pigeonholed a couple of my kids into certain things. And when I first wrote the learning plans, they were centred around what I thought the kids would want to learn. That became abundantly clear that wasn't the case as we sort of do this education model based on consent and we have created opportunities for the kids to work out what they're interested in. And my little academic Rain Man, as I call him, he is now, just by accident, showing huge interest in learning there's AutoCAD's little baby, which is design software called Tinkercad, and getting into 3D printing. Now, he's never been one for doing any kind of drawing, any kind of creative writing, anything that looks like creativity. The kid just goes, nah, I don't want any of it whatsoever. So he hasn't ever shown that creative side of himself until now. And now he's getting into it because he's found a vehicle for that creativity that isn't through, this more scientific-based approach to education or academia, which is very much his gift and skill set. So I think what's happened is that we have this opportunity to really integrate those hobbies that then create this love of learning, because they're just like, this is awesome. I get to do more of this stuff.
Easy. It's not a battle.
Yeah.
We're not having to sort of convince them that they need to learn it.
No.
They are running their own race. They are leading the way, and they're saying, this is something I'm interested in. And then as their, quote, teacher, we just have to put a few little things in place and they're off and running. Right. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the greatest delights of being a homeschool parent is watching them do that. Mm-hmm. And it is unusual because when you tell other people about it, they kind of go, oh, right. But they just can't imagine themselves doing that. But there's not a lot of work involved in that, is there, really?
I think that's a complete misnomer. And I see this on, various chat groups and things like that where people are just panicking about the idea of, how they're going to have their kids at home and things like that. And I'm like, you don't need to force them into anything. Firstly, you've got to throw the clock out the window, as we know, right? Yes. My kids now have worked out they like staying up late and getting up late, right? And that's for all of them, cross-section of 15 years old to 8-year-olds. And I'm like, oh, my God, they're going to bed after me. And I do want to sleep, but they're still getting the sleep. It's just they sleep in longer. Yeah. And so what I'm noticing is if I can find ways to encourage that. So it's about mentorship. That's what essentially happens with this stuff. It's about mentorship, and it's about being, I suppose, a voice of reason to think about guiding ways. But the real learning is that self-discovery. Totally. Just as a toddler discovers that, they can climb upstairs and not necessarily get down them, or whatever it might be.
Or they can put 2 blocks together and they get taller.
Yeah, that's right. And that is that's self-propagating, that kind of learning. It's not fed to them and going, we're going to learn about this. And it's just interesting because one of the great criticisms that my daughter had, and again, she in the school system was left behind because their pace was too fast. But she identified it. She said, we'd start learning something and then it'd be like, that was done, and then we'd move on to the next thing. And she said, I wanted to know more. So her pathway of learning is to actually go fully into a subject matter, not have a taste of this. She's not into having a smorgies experience, She wants to have the full gastronomic delight of, that type of food and really, investigate all the aspects of it. And then once she's sort of finished investigating that, then she'll go to something else. She doesn't want a taste of this, taste of that. She wants certainty in what she's looking at. And I understand that would be very comforting for her because her confidence is so rocked by the speed at which she was expected to uptake certain ideas and learnings and information. And most of that is internalising it and regurgitating it. It's not actually learning it. It's not about embodying it. It doesn't become an enrichment of person.
No.
It just becomes a retelling of information. And we have computers for that.
Yeah, we do.
Google can do it much faster.
Totally. Let's not waste our time in trying to remember everything.
Yeah. So then if we're going to alchemise education, why would we not? If we have this very powerful tool available to us with Google University, as I call it, it's not all accurate, but nor's all the information in university either. No. But, we've got that as this extraordinary resource, which is here whether you like it or not. Why would we not encourage our learners today to work out who they are?
Totally.
What they think, how they want to impact the world, how they want to better their community, how they want to better themselves, about their inner resources. Because the regurgitation is available in a millisecond. And we know that obviously as AI comes on even more so, all that will be done for us. And so we run the risk of basically turning children into depressed automatrons because their creativity will be done for them as well. So their sense of self will be run through an AI generator and it'll spit out a version of them that may be, 50% authentic, 75% authentic of their real voice, but will still be run through some kind of process. And my call is to parents, if you have questions or issues with this, start paying attention and making changes, even if it's just how you speak to your kids about this stuff, about having open conversations that generate ideas of their own, And part of that is that deprogramming or deschooling that needs to happen for kids because they're getting institutionalised, but so are we, and we're worse because we've been doing it for far longer.
Absolutely.
I have 2 university, I can't call them degrees, one was a degree and one was a diploma, and they were very useful, but I did my first degree when I didn't know what I was doing. So I basically went to uni and had fun and then paid for it.
Yep.
And then I got my job in ambulance and I got my, ambulance paramedic diploma through that. But that was far more like having an apprenticeship.
Yes.
And I knew exactly what I was doing and I loved it because it was all integrative learning. Now, that was the great resuscitation of my love of learning.
Yes.
If I didn't have that, I'd be really curious to know where my life has gone.
Yes.
But that basically set me on a trajectory of going, I can learn stuff I'm interested in and then apply it to my life. And also, it was helpful with being a paramedic, I could actually better the community for it as well.
Yes.
But that led me on this realisation we can actually be good people that love learning and bring our own voice to the world. And, that's where I've run with,
Yeah.
So as a consequence, I want that for my kids.
Yes, totally.
I want that for all kids.
And I think, having the opportunity to discover who you are first and foremost is where you get the confidence to make those decisions which do light you up.
Yeah.
What was, what was really stark to me recently was at my daughter's graduation. Year 12 graduation, and they presented every student, and I can't remember how many students there were, maybe 150 odd students, and they presented every single individual up onto the stage. And one of the things that they did as part of that presentation was they had asked the kids to all answer some questions, and then the person who was introducing them then decided which questions that they would present to the audience. And I can't remember the exact number, but it was really obvious to me that I reckon there was at least 50% of these children all were taking gap years. All were taking gap years. And I went, wow. And I spoke to another mother who had her 3rd child graduating and her firstborn had gone through, I think, maybe 5-6 years ago, and she said to me, only there was a handful in her daughter's year that were taking gap years. It was so stark to me that all these kids had got to the end of their year 12 and were, I don't know, do you say that they might have been burnt out or looking for something different or just wanting to take a break?
Very reasonably so.
Totally. And I just thought, wow, I am so pleased to see that these kids are wanting to take a break.
Yes.
And I know that there was some comments made by some of my friends earlier in the year that they said, if you take a gap year, then you'll you may never go back. Or, it just makes it so much harder because you lose momentum.
Not true. Momentum of what, though?
Well, I don't know, but there was this belief that it wasn't a good thing taking a gap year. And then when I sort of came to the graduation and saw that so many of them had actually made a decision to do that, I was just in amazement that these kids actually know what they need.
I think so too.
They really know what they need, and they know. And some of them will continue on. There won't be a problem.
Yes.
They'll get to the end of that 12 months after having travelled or just gone and worked in a pub or whatever it is that they were wanting to do, and they'll go, actually, I still do want to go to university. I still do really want to continue studying that. I enjoyed it. I miss it. I want to do it. And there'll be others that go, oh, I'm so glad I just got a little bit of perspective.
Yeah.
Or I managed to stop and almost step off the treadmill and just go, hang on, that's actually not what I really want. I actually would like to maybe try and work in this area or study this instead, or because when you're going through the school system, we tend to also, I think, just do what we're good at.
Yes.
Or where we get the results, or where we're encouraged to go.
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm really good at maths, for example, which I'm not, but I'm really good at maths, and so therefore I must study this, or I must move in this direction. But maybe that's not really what you're meant to be doing. You might be good at maths, but it might be in something completely different.
Yeah. And it's so one-dimensional anyway. I'm good at math, therefore I'll go do, STEM or whatever. I just kind of go, it's so limiting, and it doesn't talk to the creativity of the individual. Every individual is creative in their own way. It just depends on how they express it.
Correct.
And, children that have been pigeonholed into a certain academic stream often will have a sense they're not creative because they are, being fed all the information. So they stop flexing the muscle of creativity, which we all take for granted in our children when they're toddlers. That is all about being creative. So I guess, what I want to do is just close this conversation with, just some encouragement of parents to, if you recognise the value in your children having a gap year when they finish high school, then give some consideration about bringing that earlier. There is really no need to flog the dead horse all the way through the end of high school, because you may end up with a far more impressioned child in a way that you weren't hoping for. You can do a gap year, a gap month, a gap 6 months.
A gap term.
Any way you can, right? Just find a way to check in with your kids, and you will know in your heart whether you are feeling like your kids are at their fullest expression or whether they're not. And I certainly feel so grateful. And it's not to say that having kids home all the time is easy. It's not. McGill and I often want to run away and escape just for a little break. There's no noonas happening anymore. They're all gone. The kids are home. And you've got to navigate around work and things like that. Yeah. But you can actually bring all of those possibilities into your life, I'm so blessed to have a job that supports me and understands my kids are home educated, because, then my job understands that, my team understand that sometimes I'm not available because I'm with the kids and I work more flexibly. That is a reality of our world now. We're so lucky from this point of view. Now is one of the most perfect times to give yourself a break and give your kids a break if that's what's calling you, because you are well supported. Yes. So having a think about what it means to you, what it means to your kids, and whether there's a way that you could tweak these things into running your own race.
Absolutely. It's endless possibilities. We just have to be able to think outside the square.
Ain't that the case? Go circular. Get smooth.
I love it. No edges.
Squares. Until next time, beautiful people, thank you so much for joining us. We have loved this chat. Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.